So we have this one defined. We could already define for, say, our user endpoints, and we do something quite similar. So I can also say user group, and this will be API config.router.group and this again would be v1 and is going to slash users, something like this. And this is the group, and again I can apply some middlewares, and I can say user group dot use, and I provide the middlewares I would want to. So I could provide config middleware, for example. I could also provide, say, auth middleware, and I could say also provide SQL middleware. And now I can define some endpoints I would want to test. I can say ug.post. I want to test user creation. Here on line 63, we would be testing accounts creation. Here we'll be testing user creation, and it's still at endpoints /create. And the API would be found here, users.creates user. And maybe one thing I can also add is, if we have time, we would test all of them, but I don't want this video to be really long. So we have user/delete like we had before, of course, and we provide an ID. So we'll provide the ID, we'll delete the users. So say users.delete user, and then we have and maybe we can even test our health endpoints. For example, I'll call this miscellaneous group. Again, I would copy this so I don't type this again. I want to do this a couple of times so you can actually get a hang of what I'm doing. And then you can decide to get the idea to actually write sophisticated test cases depending on what you want to do. So for this, we have test our get endpoints, and this at /health, and the logic would be at maze.health, this one. I think that's mostly it. So we've defined these endpoints. Now actually nothing is happening, and now we would define the logic of what we would want to test. So the first thing I would want to test is user creation. So I'm going to write a receiver function in the API config, so I can just go ahead and invoke the test. And what I can do here is func. I make this a receiver function like I said. So I don't think I'll changing this much, so I'm passing it by reference, and I can say user creation. Let's say without authorization. So when there is no auth token, when there is no authorization header in the test, when there is no authorization header in the request, we want to test what will happen. We know, of course, that it should fail. So, but we would also want to see if that's the case. So when we want to create a user, we expect a body. I can call this post body if I can type. And yeah, I want to create my payload. It needs to be a JSON actually. So I'll say JSON.marshal, and this will be a map of string against. It should also be string, and I provide like what we had initially. So we would have first name. I can call this Tony. I would have last name. I think this is also camel case here. So last name would also be maybe 18, and I would want to provide an email because this is what I would be expecting to come in from the request, and I can say tony.18@gmail.com. Of course, this is not my actual email. And we have our response body, and of course this is not sent as this, so we'll need to convert this to bytes. So we can say resp, I can call this resp body, and this would be, I will use bytes to create a new buffer, and I'll provide my posts body. And now I prepare my request. I can call this rec, and I use HTTP test to make HTTP call to my test dummy test server. I say new request, and here I say I want to make a post request to our user creation endpoint, which should be at /v1/users/create, and I pass the body, the resp body. And so this is how we are mimicking what you could do, let's say, with something like Insomnia or Postman to make an HTTP request. That's basically what we're doing here, but we're using HTTP test because, of course, this is pertaining to our test we're writing. And now, so after we've prepared our request, I can create a new recorder. Call this HTTP test. That's new recorder. Awesome. And now I can go to visit our endpoints, which should be at that's router, it's server HTTP, this one, and I'll provide our new recorder and of course our request. And now we've made the requests. What we would want to do is to check what we get after we've made the request. We say assert that equal. And what I would want to test, of course, provide a test case. And what I would want to test is some like the status code that is returned. So I'm expecting if there is no authorization header in the request, I should expect it for 1. And this should be equal to what we get from the code. Right? And now what I can do is to just come down here and I say some like tests. And now I can say API config dot I test this guy. It takes test, of course. And then so this is a way I can structure my tests and then bring everything up here. And then in the end, I have just this one test to run to see if everything works. And now we can test this out to see if everything worked. We can also check the message of the message that is returned. So we can say assert that equal, and of course pass t. And here we would want to provide the message we would want to verify, and this would of course come from body dot we want this as a string. So, and all we need to do is to go to our middleware and say if this is the case, this is something we would expect. This is really what we would expect. So I can copy this, go back to our mock. So in here, I paste this here and I escape all of this. And I skip all of this. And so let's see if this is actually what is returned. So I can run the test again. And we got an error, and the error is that is actually almost the same string, only that there is a space in here, which is this one, and we can close it up, it's fine, and run the test again. And this time it should be fine. And what is the problem? So error, invalid or malformed token provided. Is that not what we provided? So expected actual, expected, of course, it should be a JSON. So this should be like this, and closing up here. Yep. And then let's run this, hopefully for the final time. And now it succeeded. So we can say for sure that our middleware, the auth middleware, is behaving as expected. And what we would now do is to go ahead and test the other endpoints that we've defined to see if they all behave the way we expect them to. So the next thing I want to do is to create a test. to maybe just go ahead and test our health endpoint. And I think that should also be pretty straightforward. We'll make it again look similar like what we had above. So this would be a receiver function on the API config, and we can call this health test. It takes, of course, testing. This one, and it doesn't return anything. And it's also going to be similar to what we had here is going to be a get. So I will just copy this and put it in here, and this is going to be a get, and it's going to be at v1/miss/health. It was called. Again, guys, if you come over here to our API definitions, go to the miss endpoints, you will see this v1 miss health. That's exactly what I'm doing here. That is just so you know. And this is a get, so I'm not going to pass anybody, so I'll make this new. And again, I would define this because I'm making a new request. So I'll create a new request recorder. And what I would want to do again is, of course, we make our requests. I say a.router serve HTTP, and I pass the recorder and the request. And now what I want to do again is to check what we get back, and assert equal. I'm interested again in the status code. Here I'm expecting a 200, so this I can get from the code. And what else I would want to check? I would want to check. So if we go to the miss endpoint, for example, we should be over here. When we come here, we should get a message, something back says message pong. And this is what I would want to assert here. So I say assert equal, and message will go here. So of course T, then our message will be a string, and then we'll get again our body like this. I want to test for strings. Of course you can get creative, but this is fine for now. So this would say something like message. Again, I have to skip this. So message, I should say pong. I think I have to confirm again, pong. So come back here, message pong, and let's skip this again, and pong. And then here I can again test API config dot health test and pass a T, just like this, and then we can write as many tests as we want. Again, this is one way. The whole point is, of course, to show you how this could be done. You can get creative, you can structure your code whichever way if you think it's much finer, much cooler than mine, but the point is to show you how you can actually do the tests. So that being said, again, we get something similar like we got before, so it's not expecting this to be open, so that's also fine. I remove the space and then I run the test again. At this time it should pass. Awesome. And the next thing maybe we can do again is to let's see what happens if the user tries to visit an endpoint that does not exist. What should happen? So we can say something like non-existent endpoint. Again, it takes testing. And here I'm going to copy this again. Now I will try to make a request to an endpoint that does not exist, and I can call this health Z. I know I don't have one defined as health Z. And again, I would copy this one. It's really pretty similar. You can parameterize this if you want. But what I would want to see is that when you visit an endpoint that does not exist, we should give you a 404 that it doesn't exist actually. And we can test it out again, say API config that's non-existent endpoint. And we test. And hopefully this passes still. And now maybe what we can do, I want to do something that actually involves querying. So now I would want to test user creation. I can call this again, like a receiver function, app config, and now I can say user creation. Again, it's text testing like the others. And of course, like this. What is the problem? App config. API config, sorry. API config, and now I'm gonna also do something similar. So of course, I'm still gonna make a request. So I'm just gonna copy everything here and bring it down here. So I'm still gonna make a request with a body and everything, but of course I'm gonna do something different. So I would so of course this is our body, and what I could want to do is I want to expect that when we try to create a user, that there should be calls to our database, and that call should be inserted to our user table. And so what I could do already here is to use our mock to expect the query that is being made. So I can say mock.expect exec. So I'm expecting that there should be a query that looks similar to this. Insert into, let's say I have our table is called users. Users, and now of course I provide the values, and I say first name. I mash out this to this. Sorry, should be like this. First name, last name. I'm expecting a query similar to this, and email for now. And then we have our ID, and of course the values would be this. It will be provided this way. So there should be 4 values, of course, to cater for everything we have. And then I can say yes, that's no, this should actually be this I should actually have matched with the regex, of course. So I can say regex thank you dot exactly, and now I can put this in here. And now you can go away, and now I can provide what I want to provide. So I'm expecting that the arguments to this query would be what is provided up here. So I have Tony, I have 18, and seriously I can't type today. And this will be the email, this guy over here. And the ID, as we set it up, will just be incremental, so it's just going to be 1. And so it should return a result, and this I can use then SQL mock. That's new results to expect what I would want to expect. So of course I'm returning 1 value, and that is the ID, which in this case is 1. And this is what I expect to happen. And then I need to close this up and say mock.x to actually dispatch the query. And then I expect commit. Of course, when you write a query, you commit it and then it gets executed. Depending, of course, on the client you're using to connect to your database. So you get the point. So this would be the body as usual. The requests again would look something like this. And now what I would want to do is to add our header, and this is where I add our authorization header. And the only thing our middleware is doing now is to just split it and see if there are two things in there. So the first one should be bearer, so I can just say bearer token some whatever, and this should be fine. And now of course our recorder, HTTP test, that's new recorder. And now we can make our requests. So now I can say a.router that's serve HTTP, our recorder, and our our request. And now what I would want to assert is the status code. Assert that's equal, and I would want to say this should be 201, and this should be what would be returned from our code. API config that's user creation, and let's test it. And now this succeeds. So as you can see, we are able to test a couple of things. So you could already understand how this is going. So now the focus again is not on this API endpoints that we are defined here, but the logic behind them. And again, of course, you can split this the other way around and again write tests to target specific aspects of your application. And that is really the point I wanted to show you, just so you understand that when it comes to tests, of course, you need to understand what really you would want to test and narrow the test down, at least when it has to do with unit testing, which of course you could or mostly should write as much as possible of them, and just to make sure that everything is behaving as it should. And so what I would do now is more or less leave it out for you to try to test the other endpoints. If you have any questions or if you encounter any problems trying to replicate what we did here, please reach out to me and I will try as much as I can to answer your questions. And one last thing, like I said, I would want to show you is, so in this case we focus on testing an API, the business logic behind the API. And one thing I could also do is maybe actually test our DB. Let's say db test.go and package mock. And I would like to test our DB. So I would want to again do something similar to what we did before. I could have one struct called config, and this would take a couple of things. So it would hold our GOM DB, it will hold our mock, this will be our SQL mock, and we could say something like I don't know, say let's define our, of course we have our user, but we can see something like this. User would be of our user, and let's just focus on the DB. So what I can do actually is to, since I'm testing the database, I can decide to create a new model more or less. And here I could, I don't know, maybe call this I can still call it user, is fine. And here I define a user, for example. It's gonna look similar to what we had. So ID would be a string, first name would be a string, last name would be a string, email would be a string as well. And now what I would want to do is I can just go ahead and define my tests. I'll call the test case DB, for example, and again I passed this testing.t okay, and now I can create an instance of my user, and this would be instance of my config rather. So this would be something like this, config, and I can define the variables I would want to create, maybe like this. I say db, so I can just, when I define them, I just map them to this. So db and maybe error, I want to use a global error in this case. And so now let's do something. And now I can say, and of course actually I don't need to redefine this anymore. So this would be my config.mock, and I can say if error is not equal to nil, I can also maybe t that's error, and then I can say something like failed to open mock SQL DB error, and error, something like this. So we say if DB is not equal to, if it's nil, so if we got nothing, and we can just say maybe mock DB returned nil, something like this. And we can also maybe verify our mock. This is not really necessary, but I just want to be sure that so I don't get funny surprises. So if this is nil, I also want to do something like this. And now I can actually establish a connection, config.db, and this I can get from gom.open my SQL.new, and upon my SQL.config. For the config, I might pass a couple of things, of course. Connection would be the DB, and I can say skip initialization with version, and I say true. I can of course pass the gom config, and this should be empty. And then I can also do something like this again. This is looking good in my opinion. And now of course I can defer db closing, so this would close later. And now I can say config.user, and this would be user, and I can provide ID, maybe I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know. And again, first name Tony, last name 18, email I can say Tony.18 at gmail.com. Okay, so I can start my mock, and I say config, not condic, that mock, expect begin, dot mock, and I expect exec, and of course I can use my regex again, quarter meta, and then I expect this query inserts into, I'll call this users, and I provide my values again. So it's gonna be first name, last name, email, ID, and values again, like before, would be passed as args, so this should be for a number. And need to close this here. And again with args. And now I can say maybe config.user, that's first name, config.user, that's last name, config.user, that's email, config.user, that's ID. And I say this will return result, and SQL mock. Come on, I can't type today at all. So that new result, and maybe I convert this to, let's say, 64 for example, and this would be ID. So what I can actually do is to, maybe I do something like this and I say ID. Maybe I skip the error for now, and I use string conv, and I convert this to int, and I can pack the user ID, and here I pass the ID, and this should be, let me keep this I can just make you one, is fine. Let's keep it simple. And now I can of course end our, I can say config.mock expects a commit. So this would be the end of the query you would want to run. And now I say, actually try to do this, and I say config.db.create, and I pass a reference to config.user, and of course I expect the error. I say if this error, if this error is not equal to nil, and I can maybe do error and say fail to insert into GOM-DB, something like this. And maybe I just terminate this and I say that fail, and I say that fail now. And yep, and maybe another thing I could also do is to check if expectations were met. So config.mock yes, and then I again do something like this. If this error is not equal to nil, and I can also maybe change that error and say expectations were not met, something like this. And then let's see, we can actually run this test, and now we can see that our test succeeds. And so if this is not clear, I think this is also like really pretty straightforward in my opinion. But anyways, if you in any way at all run into a problem while trying to work with this, I would really love and appreciate that you drop me a question, so I will definitely get back to you and answer any question you could have. And that's it. And of course we can run all our tests, and when we do some like this go tests, and then we can go as deep as possible to make sure that we run every of our test files. And I see here that the two of files that we had actually succeeded, and of course the ones we have in here in our mocks. So that's really it. I'm really glad that you were able to follow through to the end of this tutorial. And again, like I said earlier, if you in any way run into problems, if something is not clear, if there are things if you agree or disagree with, it doesn't really matter. You can always reach out to me with your concerns. We can, of course, have a conversation and yeah, find a more agreeable terms for the both of us. And anyways, thank you so much for being part of this journey. And again, if you're new to my channel or if you've not subscribed, it would encourage me so much if you'd do. And then this would really encourage me to go out there and make more videos for you. Anyways, thank you so much for being part of this journey. Until next time, have a lovely evening and see you later. Bye bye.